Hi, my name is Sage Turk, and 2 years ago, something big happened that would change my life forever. Despite being an active Mormon, Christian, and believer for over 33 years, I lost my faith in God. What I didn't lose was my happiness, my hope, and the curiosity to explore every facet of this crazy adventure called life. And like every adventure, sometimes we can use a little guide.
Today's episode, Labels, starring me, Sage, and my special guest host, Glen. Also, the label game, the Atheist song, and special bonus footage at the end of the episode.
Infants on Thrones presents The New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole.
Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to another episode of the New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. As always, I am your host, Sage Turk, and with me is a very, very special guest host, Mr. Glen Oslin. Glen.
I'm moderately special today. I haven't quite hit that, really special place. No, not
special.
yet. No, it's kind of early in the day for me at 10 a.m. on a Saturday.
Well, Glen, I consider you very, very, very special. And in fact, I usually like to start each episode with a little bit of trivia about my guest host. And for you, my favorite bit of trivia is something that I know a lot of people should know. It's fairly obvious, but I'm surprised how many people don't. So not only are you the founder of the Infants on Thrones podcast, but isn't it true that you also write, perform, and voice all the other Infants characters yourself?
Not every single one of them. Like Jake is a real person.
That's right. Well, yeah.
Tom's sort of real. It depends. Yeah.
So, Glenn, I got a little bit of a game for us to play.
Okay.
To go ahead and get this thing started. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to test your knowledge of the labels that we hear sort of every day, and especially in like a high school setting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a little list.
Do I have to be on Urban Dictionary to follow you through this one?
Well, this is the point, is we're going to see how well you actually know internally. So you're going to have 5 seconds after I read each one of these sort of person types. You tell me what the popular label is used to describe them. You ready?
Okay, so you're describing the stereotype, and I'm giving you the label for it.
The label. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Correct. Okay. And you've got 5 seconds, and if you can't remember what it is, you can also come up with one on the spot. Are these all like U.S. labels, or are you? That's correct. Yeah, I did not go to Britain. I don't know what a chufter is or anything like that. So
we're not going to a bummer or a fanny or anything like that.
That's true. Well, we might go to some of that, but we'll see. Okay, are you ready? And begin. Popular sports kids.
Jocks.
Good.
Right.
Popular rich kids.
Preppies?
Preppies, there you go. Exactly right.
Right.
That's correct. Popular girls all named Heather.
Popular girl, cheerleaders?
Incorrect. The correct answer is Heathers.
Heathers. Oh, is that what that movie was about?
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly what it was about. Yep.
Okay, because I hadn't seen it, but I know that there is one. Okay, go ahead.
Star Trek fans.
Well, see, here you can either go Trekkies or Trekkers. There's a debate.
Correct. So both of those are accepted. Star Wars fans.
Star Wars fans. Is there a label for Star Wars fans?
The correct answer is nerds. Okay. What would you call skateboarders?
Skaters.
Very good. You're correct.
Yeah.
How about 1950s car enthusiasts?
1950s car enthusiasts.
Correct answer, Greasers.
Greasers. Okay. Is that from the movie Grease? Grease Lightning?
I think so. That's where it comes from. Yeah, Grease Lightning.
That's where the 50s culture came from, like everything, right? Like they were just copying the movie Grease.
Yeah, Grease came first and then the 1950s.
It is the word.
That's right. All right, how about scuba divers?
I just call them scuba divers.
Oh, I'm sorry. The correct answer is bubble lords.
I don't know. I'm failing miserably at this stage.
Marijuana enthusiasts.
Potheads.
Very good. Correct. Cocaine enthusiasts.
I don't know. Right? I don't know.
Correct answer is crackheads.
But that's crack. It's got to be crack cocaine.
Oh, I should specify then. Crack cocaine enthusiasts.
I'm going to challenge that one. I want to challenge that one.
Oh,
is there a challenge?
We're going to flag it.
this?
Yep. Okay, we yellow flag that one.
Okay.
All right. How about next one? Sex Pistols fans.
Punks.
Yeah. Rodents that spray a foul substance.
That would be skunks.
Correct. And then people who drink too much.
Drunks.
I'm sorry. The correct answer is my dad. All right, Glenn. That was not so good.
Yeah.
I think maybe 50% on that. That's maybe barely a passing grade.
I don't know. I think you were setting me up for failure on a couple of those.
Wow. Well, Glenn, I mean, you may not be the master of labels, but you will be after this episode because that's the theme of this week's episode is labels.
Hey.
So we're gonna go ahead and just dive right into it, Glenn. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is just this idea of labels. We went through a whole bunch of them. Some of them were more commonly used than others. I mean, I use the term bubble lords all the time because we have a big scuba diver problem where I'm from. But for you, what about this concept of labels? In my mind, tend to be labels that are used by other groups describing that group, often with somewhat negative connotations. Would you sort of agree with that when you're saying jocks, preps, nerds, that kind of thing? Like it tends to have sort of a negative connotation. Do you think that's true?
Sometimes there could be. Yeah, it could be used in those contexts where I mean, you can have in-group labels and then out-group labels where you're trying to define yourself by contrasting it against some other group. And so if you're able to demonize that group in some way, then that makes you the good one and them the bad one. So it's a real simple and very common way of, self-identification or group identification by comparing yourself to some other group. So yeah, that definitely happens.
Yeah, and I think it's something that you see it in the Bible if you're reading the Old Testament. I mean, you see it in every high school. I mean, humans seem to be very inherently tribal, right?
Well, I think it stems from insecurity, and that everybody at their core, to one degree or another, except maybe, I don't know, extreme narcissists or sociopaths or things, and now I'm throwing out other labels, but that everybody needs some validation from other people, and so that I think that leads to that sense of tribalism and wanting to fit in with a group and wanting to understand yourself where you fit in with other people around you, and using labels. I mean, there's the in-group labels too, where it's like people on the inside of this group, and you see this in Mormonism a lot, where there's words, these etic words that only the insiders know.
Right.
And everybody, like you're talking about, oh, I went to the Ward building, and then you go, oh, I know that person is Mormon just because of the word that they use.
Right. Yeah,
and
exactly.
You feel the sense of kinship and identity, and so yeah, it works in multiple ways, I think.
Yeah, and I think and part of this episode we might use the term label and even the word stereotype sort of interchangeably. And I have this friend, and he and his wife have this sort of like 15-year running argument. It's like their longest running argument of all time. Which is sort of funny to us because we like to sort of kindle the fire whenever we go visit them. But his wife, my friend's wife, believes that stereotypes or labels are never helpful, that they're just inherently a bad thing. And my friend, his argument is that they inherently are helpful, that they might not be productive, but that they're useful sort of in their own right. And where do you sort of fall in that sort of camp in terms of stereotypes
well,
or
he's
labels?
right and he's right and she's wrong.
He'll be so happy to hear that. Why do you think
Yeah.
so?
Well, because she's only focusing on a very small uh, definition of labels, so her cross section is much smaller and his is more inclusive, and
Right.
he's right, like labels, stereotypes, prejudice, there's this, I think that there's PC culturally or cultural ideal that's out there that says, well, we shouldn't judge. You shouldn't judge other people.
Right.
But it's kind of bullshit, because
Right.
you can't go through life without judging. And to judge just means to make a determination based on the information that you have.
Right.
And you're never going to have complete information. So you go in with these pre-judging, prejudice things that you've inherited through your experience and what you've heard through stories and everything like that, and you make a judgment, and it's just you can't avoid doing those kinds of things, and labels and stereotypes. There's times where you judge something wrong, you get it wrong, and you're grossly wrong, and then there's times where you get it right, and so I think that the wife in that case is focusing on the times where you get it right, and she's more plugged into that PC cultural ethos that you just shouldn't judge, and I think she's just wrong.
Fair enough. And it makes me think of various debates that I would have when I would be in Sunday school, and you'd hit the judge not, lest ye be judged sort of.
Yeah.
There's like 40 verses in Scripture that give you something of that nature, and it's very complicated because it's one of those things that you can use on any side of the fence. So it's like, I don't want people judging me, but at the same time, I need to use correct judgment to avoid sin, or I need to avoid bad situations. It's like, it inherently is sort of meaningless because it can mean different things all throughout your day. And so what's the point in even saying it? But I think you're right. I think as human beings, like, we just don't have the time to put on our Sherlock Holmes hat and figure out every person's backstory, every situation, from the minute details up. We kind of have to make these broad judgments and assessments just to survive. Not necessarily, that doesn't mean that it's fair. Some people are going to get caught in a crossfire, I think. But no, I can see how it's very helpful.
In Mormonism, and I would need to put on my Sherlock Holmes hat and actually go in and research this, but it seems like it's maybe a Joseph Smith translation on one of those judge not scriptures that he added unrighteously, or
Right.
that,
Yeah, judge not unrighteously.
that, like, this concept, that judging righteous judgment is okay, and that the way that you judge other people, this is in the Doctrine and Covenants somewhere, like 62:10 or something, I think.
Right. Yeah.
That like, with the judgment that you, no, I gave the wrong reference, but anyway, but whatever righteous judgment you give to others, that's how you will be judged too. And I don't know if that's a uniquely Mormon concept or if that's broader Christianity, but I always, when I was growing up, took that, that parable, don't throw the stone. Or I guess that wasn't a parable, was it? That really happened with Mary Magdalene.
That historically really happened. Yes.
Yeah, this historically really happened. It's not presented in the New Testament as a parable. It's presented as if it really
Right,
happened.
yeah.
But those without sin, go ahead and throw the first stone.
Right.
And Jesus got them because they were all guilty. Well, another way you could look at that is that the righteous, the ones that are without sin, they're sanctioned. They're
Right.
divinely sanctioned to judge and to throw stones. So I always thought that if you're judging righteous judgment, just judge people the way that you would expect yourself to be judged. And so even at a young age, I thought, well, I always want to be given the benefit of the doubt when people don't really know. So I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I've tried to do that throughout my life. And I think that was really, that's why I did the TBM whisper and things like that.
Exactly.
Let's not be so dismissive. The things that seem to not make sense to us, they do make sense to other people. Let's try to understand that. And I think a lot of that stems from this whole judgment idea that maybe can tie back into labels, because that's a form of judgment. But yeah, interesting. So anyway, I just had that random thought as
So
you were
maybe,
talking.
so if we were to do sort of the Glen Oslin translation, so the Geo translation of that verse,
Mhm.
it'd be something like, "Judge all you want, just don't be such a smug asshole about it." Does that sound about right?
I don't think that I would say it that way, but yeah.
Okay, that'll be mine. So the Sage Turk translation
Yeah,
of it would
okay.
be, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead and judge because it's human nature, but
Because then, asshole is a label, and what does it mean? It's going to mean different things to different people. I remember he, I was observing this conversation once between two people, and they were both talking about Orange County because they had grown up in Orange County. Except about 10 minutes into the conversation, they realized one of them was in Orange County in California and the other one was in Orange County in Indiana. But and so they were talking
right,
past each other the whole time, but they thought they were, describing people and places and things because they hadn't taken the time to put on the Sherlock Holmes cap and investigate this term that they were using and sharing with each other, that they both, that they had this knowledge or whatever, assumed assumptions behind this term. They're talking about Orange County, and they don't really know what the other person's thinking when they say Orange County. And any kind of label or any kind of words like that, so even the husband and wife example that you gave, when I say she's wrong, well, what I really mean is that her understanding of those words is limited to a certain demographic, and his is more inclusive.
right,
But so they're disagreeing on the definition of words is really what's
right.
happening in that case. And I think that happens a lot, that we just make assumptions that somebody says something and, oh, they must mean what I'm thinking, when it probably isn't that way.
Although
A lot of
I totally agree, but I think in the situation of the two guys from Orange County, I'm sorry, but the guy from Indiana, that's his fault.
Yeah.
You say you're
Yeah.
from Orange County and you don't say Orange County, Indiana. Like, I'm sorry, man. That's your fault.
He didn't really even know that there was an Orange County, California, and the one from California didn't know that there was an Orange County, Indiana. They only knew what they had been exposed to in the course of their lives, and they had never been exposed to the fact that there is another Orange County someplace else. And this is my exit from Mormonism too. I mean, like,
Right.
you grow up as a Mormon and you think all these things are, oh, this is definitely from Joseph Smith or from, revelation from God, all these things that are unique to us as Mormons. And then just a limited experience growing up in that bubble, for me at least, it was going, oh, they've got these same concepts in Islam. They've got this in Buddhism and
Yeah,
in
this is
India.
common across humanity.
It's common all over the place.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
So Glenn, let's say
I'm
growing
taking
up.
you off script, aren't I?
Oh no, it's
Aren't I?
this is great.
Okay.
We're all
Okay.
about tangents here, Glenn. That's why I'm happy to have
Okay.
you.
This episode's now about tangents,
That's
but
right.
yeah.
The theme, tangents, and how to go off on them. So here's a tangent. When you were a kid, and maybe let's just even say like throughout your life, what would you say your primary label was? Do you think you had one? Whether or not you would have chosen it yourself, what do you think your label was?
Smart ass.
Smartass?
Yeah.
That's probably mine too, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
any other ones, or you think that's the primary one?
Oh, there were times where people thought I was a bully when I was a kid,
Oh,
but
okay, interesting.
it's just because I was taller than everybody else, and if they didn't do what I wanted them to do, I'd shove them into unfinished basements, you know. So, or throw their bike. I threw a kid's bike into an unfinished basement once, and so everybody in the neighborhood thought I was a bully. But he was the one. He pushed the ladder to anyway. He instigated it. He had it coming.
Now, see, that's the kind of tangent we could really go off on. Your
Yeah,
serial
he had it
basement
coming.
pushing.
Yeah,
That sounds terrifying. Uh,
yeah.
what about the label of were you labeled as Mormon? Like, did people know you as the Mormon kid?
Sure, but I grew up in a fairly saturated
Oh, did you?
Mormon
Okay.
area. Yeah, in Arizona. Grew up partly in Mesa, partly in Tempe, and So yeah, people did know me as Mormons, but it was also I was with a lot of Mormons and in that group.
Right. Yeah, so for me growing up, so I grew up in Oregon for a little while and then Mississippi for a little while, both places where there were very, very little
Yeah.
LDS kids. Not little LDS kids, like small.
Yeah, they're just small there. They're
Very
tiny.
small, very malnutritioned LDS kids.
Yeah, I tried to live there, and they're like, "You're too tall for
You're,
Oregon or
you have to
Mississippi.
be
You got to
this
go to
high to
Arizona."
be a
So,
Mormon kid in Oregon. Yeah, that's right. uh, yeah, just I was one of the only ones, and so I definitely was labeled that way. And I found for the majority of my life that it was a badge that I could either be embarrassed about or I had to sort of wear with honor, right? And I definitely leaned into it. So I was one of those that I made it very vocal that I didn't drink and I didn't do this and I didn't party and that kind of stuff. Um, and sure enough, I actually end up finding that people, although I'm sure there were both sides of it, I noticed the times when people would respect that or go like, "Oh, that's cool, me either," that kind of thing. Because as a little Mormon kid, you're trained
yeah, that's
to
called confirmation bias.
confirmation bias. Exactly right. Yeah, I'm sure there
Yeah,
were whole
yeah.
swaths of people that were just like,
That's
"Oh,
that's the
brother."
label for that.
I was not good at catching eye rolls.
Yeah.
I didn't notice them. Now I'm great at it. But did you have at any point through your life where you had to sort of own that label of believer? Obviously, when you're in Arizona or even, but I mean, like on the mission or other places, did you find that you were leaning into this idea of being a believer?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I would say the way that I started graduate school, because in graduate school I went out to Indiana University coming from BYU, and so going from a high concentration of Mormon people to being the only Mormon in the graduate class. And there were people that they knew that had been Mormons, and actually I think there was another Mormon guy that was in the class with me, but yeah, so I was known as a Mormon. I went to a creative writing 3-week course that was sponsored by Notre Dame. I did that one summer, and I was the only Mormon there among a bunch of Catholics, and it was faith and fiction was the theme. So I was
Oh
writing
yeah,
about Mormon type stuff, and they were writing about Catholic stuff, and yeah, so I had to I and I but the way that I wanted to define my Mormonism by then wasn't quite the TBM. It was more like, yeah, but I'm an enlightened Mormon. Like I'm
right.
still a believer,
Yeah,
but I only believe in the cool stuff, and the stupid stuff. Of course, I don't believe in that. But of course, things that I thought were cool weren't shared. And I remember this one woman from Canada that just went off on me because of the patriarchy in the priesthood, and how could I be part of an organization that is so misogynistic, and I just retreated into my apologistic, but my mom's okay with it, my wife's okay
right.
with it,
Yeah, yeah.
they're all right, they don't need the
Some of
priesthood.
my best
But
friends are women.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
really interesting, Glenn, because I definitely did the exact same thing. I remember sort of clearly the transition for me as a younger kid. It was very much as goody two shoes, sort of Mormon as you can be, and then in high school and kind of moving into sort of college is definitely where I found that I loved being known as like the cool Mormon. Like I was Mormon, but I wasn't super churchy. I wasn't like wearing WWJD bracelets, which were all the rage when I was in high school. Like, I didn't swear, but I was like, I tried very hard to like both be Mormon, but also be socially accepted and that kind of stuff. And I even remember
Mhm.
after like my mission, like in the work setting, I loved it when people would come to me and they'd go, "Wait, you're Mormon? I never would have guessed," because not because I was doing bad things, but just because thought I was presenting myself as a pretty grounded, accepting, and that was sort of us doing sort of gay rights stuff. It for me it felt good to sort of buck the trend and identify as a thing, but identify as the cool version of a thing, which I think is kind of what I heard you explaining.
Yeah, yeah, because I think with that label Mormon, there's facets to it that you want to emulate. and there's facets that you're embarrassed about. That's how it was in my case. And
Yeah.
so it was, how do I redefine this label for me,
Right.
and take the things that I like and get rid of the things that I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So see, we're good at tangents and also segues, because that is a perfect segue
Hmm.
into the next part, which is definitely why doing this particular episode, but the entire series, and even now, kind of where my mind is in trying to redefine this label of atheist. So it's kind of the exact same thing for me as trying to be a cool Mormon, is trying to show, like, yes, I definitely identify with this one label, but I guess it's just my perpetual need to buck trends and stereotypes and show that, hey, I'm pretty cool. I think I'm pretty open-minded. I think I'm not an asshole. But I am curious, before we get into the term sort of atheist and what we're trying to do with it now, for you as a believer, tell me a little bit about what that word meant to you. I mean, was atheism a scary word for you as a believer?
Yeah, it was definitely pejorative because any like I mistakenly thought that an atheist is 100% certain that there is no God,
Right.
and so it was like this very 180 degrees from where I was, that was certain that there was a God and was trying to convince everybody that there was a God. That atheists are trying to convince people that there is not a God. And then you've also got all the Book of Mormon stereotypes with the
Right.
Nehor and Korihor, and these guys that, of course, they knew. They knew that there really was a God. In the end, they
Right.
admitted that they knew, and they were just lying. And the whole time, so I would, I'm sure there were elements of that in the way that I thought of atheists, that especially if it was an atheist who had been uh, a believing Mormon at one point and was now just apostate.
Yeah, no, exactly right. I think in my mind, I thought of atheism and atheists as these sort of active antagonists to believers. So that their whole goal, and that was probably because I'm thinking my whole goal as a believer was to try and get other people to believe. And since my
Yeah,
belief was the most important thing to me, I saw this sort of army of dark countenanced people who their goal was to take God away, or to bring people over to the dark side. They were definitely like Lord Vader, out there. And
yeah,
so for me, there was no nuance to it. It was definitely, atheists are bad because, I mean, their whole mission, why do you even call themselves atheists, is to tear down. And like you said, these Book of Mormon and other sorts of caricatures helped reinforce it. But their whole goal is to squash the most important thing in your whole life, which is your belief. So how could you not loathe such horrible supervillains? Like they were like Nazi level Indiana Jones supervillains. You know what I mean?
yeah. Except that they weren't to the level of caricature. That they definitely existed in the real world.
Right.
Like, this is a real problem, that atheists are going to take over the government or take over education system,
Yeah.
and enforce their, like, I never got into the whole war on Christmas kind of thing, but that's an example of the threat level atheist.
Threat
They're going
level
to take,
atheist. Yeah, that's right.
right, they're just going to take away everything that we love.
Right.
And what's the scripture? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you shall die.
Oh yeah.
Is that saying that in a good way or in a bad way? I
Oh,
don't
oh
remember
no, it's always
anymore.
a bad way. Yeah. They would say, like,
That,
look at the heathens. That's what they say. They're not planning for tomorrow. They're just saying, "Oh, enjoy life," like an idiot.
but I think I remember at one point that was always my understanding of that scripture, and then I went and I read it someplace else, and I'm like, wait, this is saying that this is like a good thing. Hang on, but maybe not. I've got this very fuzzy memory of that. Maybe I was drinking when I read it. I don't know.
And being merry.
So
I was eating and
yeah, I
drinking and
must have
being
been
merry, and then
very,
you read that scripture. But I had that exact same scripture. I had a
yeah.
reaction to it at a certain point where I thought to myself, I thought to, at least to myself, like, is that such a bad thing? Like, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And definitely, because I'm thinking to myself, like, sure, drinking, if they're talking about alcohol, that must be bad. But eating and being
Yeah,
merry.
I
And
think
like,
that's what it was. Yeah, I need to put on the Sherlock Holmes cap again and investigate this now, because I have this lingering suspicion that it was meant initially as a good thing, like to say,
uh-huh.
enjoy your life, enjoy the moment that you're in. You know, like Mormonism says, don't procrastinate the day of your repentance,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
That this
right.
is actually saying, don't procrastinate uh, sucking the marrow out of the bones of life. Carpe diem,
Well, you're not
and
allowed to
and
suck marrow out of
enjoy
bones as
life.
a Mormon, so that's the problem.
Yes, if you abide by the word of wingdom, then you have to.
Right.
I don't remember why we went on that tangent.
Oh, well, it was super. It was a good one.
Marrow, sucking marrow out of
Right.
bones.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, and it's now sort of changing a perspective and realizing that. Well, first off, for me, realizing that people have been uh, unbelievers since the dawn of time. So like you hear about these verses in the Bible and it's like, oh, there was clearly groups of people saying, guys, I don't know if I believe the same as you. Like there were atheists all throughout time, and you see that like, from Aristotle and or not Aristotle, but Plato and these philosophers and that kind of thing. So this is not a new thing. But B, also kind of for me, just that perspective shift of like, holy cow, some of what religion is trying to do is trying to control and trying to put a dark spin on. I think what to me now is my focus of sort of atheism is recognizing that if this is it, then we need to take advantage of that. And if this is it, we need to kind of get a move on. If you've got things that you want to do, things you want to experience, like this is your chance. And there's like,
Yeah, eat,
there's
drink, and
power in
be
that.
merry, for tomorrow you shall die. And so it's the inverse of the judgmental way of interpreting that
Yeah.
scripture, right? Where this is a good thing.
Well, and
Be happy,
as a
enjoy
believer,
yourself.
I even did a talk on this. I remember, and it was one of my last talks as a believer, because I was definitely on the slippery slope. So take that for what it's worth. But my perspective, I had this it dawned on me because I had a really good friend whose dad had been the bishop of our ward, and he was hit by a car and he was killed. Really, right before. So this bishop who had died, his son, who was my friend, they just had a baby, and so it would have been this guy's granddaughter. And I remember thinking to myself, man, even though we believe in eternal families, that guy is never going to get the chance to be a grandfather to his granddaughter while she's at least a child, right? Because I was thinking she's going to grow up, she's never going to know her grandfather, like she's going to be an adult by the time they meet again in the afterlife. And it was really sort of that first inkling of like, oh, it really doesn't matter what you believe in terms of an afterlife. There are things that are truly temporal. There are things that will be lost no matter what. And even if it's just a slice of time, like your child being an infant, and bouncing it on your knee, it's like that's going to end at some point. And you'll never have that again. And I had this real sort of like aha moment of, yeah, we kind of do need to eat,
This was a
drink, and
talk
be merry.
that you gave in church.
Yeah. Yeah, it was trying to say that, look, if we're using the afterlife as an excuse to not take advantage of the here and now, then I got news for you. Like there's plenty of stuff you can miss out on, and you'll never get back if you're procrastinating. I don't know how well it was accepted, but it was sort of my way as a believer of starting to put these pieces together that I thought was
Well, there's that
insightful.
song in My Turn on Earth. Do you know My Turn on Earth?
I do know My Turn on Earth, yes.
Is it over? Have I finished the game? Have I found what I came here to find? Just a few moments more till the moment I leave it all behind me. I'm not ready. I must find or must make something good. I can take that to my home. Now my friends must stand back as I stand here, just me. All
Yeah, so there's that song that represents that perfectly, you know.
Right.
So it's within the, you know, some dreams must wait, life isn't long enough, and
Yeah.
you know, there. Well, although it does say that maybe that one that's putting like an eternal spin on things, like even though there won't be time to do it in life, that's why we have eternity for the things that we weren't able to do in life. I think that's the spin. So maybe I'm wrong.
Right. No,
Maybe it wasn't quite so. Uh,
no,
uh,
I think you're right. We'll have to.
I can't think of the label for it.
Yeah. Shoot, we're not good at thinking of labels, apparently.
Dang.
So let's talk a little bit about now that we are on this other side and why I'm, excited to sort of unpack this a little bit. And you could do it for hours and hours and hours, but we'll do what we can in the time we've got. Now, as
For
an
tomorrow
atheist,
we die.
and that's the end of it. At least if you're an atheist. So here I am. I do. I identify as an atheist. It is the label that best describes me, and for whatever reason, and I'm not even for whatever reason, I'm not going to go there. I get why people have a problem with the label. It's blatantly obvious. But when I do see people that waffle and hem and ha about even just saying the word, I do think to myself, like, is there a way that we can better understand what this actually does mean, so people don't have to be so afraid of labeling themselves that way? Like, can we take it back, I guess is what I'm saying. So for you, when like using the term atheist now, how do you think you define it, or how does it apply to you? Redefine the word atheist for me in your own mind. What does it mean?
Well, I actually referred to myself as an atheist for the first time out loud this week.
Yeah, wow.
I just moved, and in this new area where we live in Arizona, missionaries have come to the door. I've gotten texts from the executive secretary and the ward. Hey, we're going to read your membership records in. Are you guys going to be in church on Sunday? You know, things like this that I'm like, okay, how do I deal with this? So I texted back the executive secretary and said, could maybe the bishop and his counselors, if they want to meet us and talk to us, maybe they could come to our house. And so they set it up. So this last Tuesday night, the bishop and his counselors came by, and we just sat and talked, and it was a nice conversation, where I just wanted to let them know who we are, and we're not interested in being active, and it doesn't mean that we're hostile or mean, or like we can be friends and coexist, but being part of that group, there's this underlying assumption that we all share the same beliefs, and
Right.
if we don't, like, you can't really be part of the group and have opposite beliefs and fit in very well, and it's just really uncomfortable. And so I don't want, he asked if I wanted home teachers. I'm like, not really, because they ask if they can pray, if they can share messages, and so I'll be polite and allow it, but I don't really want it. It makes me feel uncomfortable, and I'm not able to really share with them what I think about stuff. So
Right.
it's just awkward. And he said, "Well, what do you think? Like, what are your beliefs on God?" And I said, "Well, I'm an atheist." And it just was shocking to say, because I'd never,
Right.
like, I'm
Yeah.
still new at the point to even like claim that. And
Yes.
I probably wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been for the John DeLynn conversation that we had a month or so ago,
Right.
where we talked with him about atheism. So I don't really think that there is a way to reclaim atheism. Language doesn't work that way. One of the many reasons why I left the church and had to slowly strip away all these different things that I wanted to keep believing in, but I just couldn't anymore. One was the Tower of Babel story, because I knew that the reason that story exists is to explain to ancient peoples why different languages exist in the world?
Right.
How is it that the people that live just 20 miles away or 100 miles, whatever it was at the time,
Right.
speak a different language? Why? And so their explanation was, well, after the flood, everybody said, well, let's build a tower and get to God so that he'll never flood the earth again. And God's like, oh, they're getting too close. It's like the Icarus story, getting too close to the sun. They're getting too close. They're getting too close. What'll we do? Oh, let's scatter their language so they can't finish building the tower. That'll show them. Like, yeah, that's not real. Like God,
Right.
first of all, wouldn't be afraid of a tower reaching heaven.
Right.
And that I've got to scatter their language. And so I'm like, okay, this is an ideological legend. It's crossed into the realm of myth. It's not true. But then the Book of Mormon, you have to believe it because
Right.
the whole
Yeah.
ether thing.
Yeah,
So
it
it just
paints
fell
you into
apart.
a corner, right.
But and the reason for this tangent is because language doesn't work that way, where just overnight God changes and like now I speak Chinese and I spoke, so you can't really take a word like atheism that has, like I explained my view of atheist when I was a believer, and all of the reasons that I believed it that way, it spoke to things that we talked about in the beginning of this discussion. My insecurity as a believer and my need for validation, and how that validation was being reinforced every week multiple times with all of my interactions at church and in church activities.
Right.
And there's so many things that are happening in those settings, and one of those things is the labels like atheist that are demonized to effectively shore up the in group, because we're defining ourselves against this evil other, and there is a value and function to that for those people inside of that group. And so for me to think that I could do something to reclaim that is to misunderstand what is going on,
Right.
and to ignore what is going on. So I don't think that there's any way to reclaim the word atheist. At the same time, because I was having this conversation with my bishop and he's sitting in my house, I felt comfortable to say to him, and I wanted to communicate to him, we're a lost cause. Don't send your people after us and think that there's hope, and so I used atheist intentionally to say, I don't believe that there is well, actually, what I believe is that everything is man-made.
Right.
And so our concept of God is a human creation. It's not a divine creation. And if there is something that is out there, it isn't in our awareness or consciousness, or they're just I have no way of knowing who or what that is, and I don't believe that anybody on this planet does.
Right.
And so
for God.
So I
Yeah.
So I explained that to him as a way of trying to redefine or explain what I meant by atheism. But yeah, anyway.
Well, I want to unpack that a little bit. There was a lot there, Glenn. You brought up some good points, some of which I'll push against actually a little bit. But the first thing, I think it was really insightful what you just said, that God, at least any form of God that I think anybody listened to this podcast that would have been explained to them or taught to them, or they would have learned the attributes of over time. Yes, as a man-made creation, as when you move into the unbeliever side of things, you do start to kind of see it. Definitely for that, you're like, oh, I see the way that God acts in Scripture, or the way that He is described. Not only feels man-made, but fairly primitive, because this is a very old concept. And that for me was one of the reasons why I started feeling like when people would push against me and say, well, you can't say that there is no God, and kind of how I want to describe it to people, and I think all atheists would essentially agree with this, is that, yeah, of course, none of us are saying that there's no possibility that a thing exists out there that's way bigger than us and so hard to comprehend, but that thing would have to be so much more complex it would have to be like describing a color you've never seen before, right? It's like human language wouldn't be able to describe a thing that could possibly be responsible for or involved in the creation of, say, a universe and quantum physics. It's like humans are good at explaining simple things, and clearly, God as a man, it's like that I know does not exist. That's what I feel comfortable in saying. The man-made description, the creation of God, just like I don't believe, is one of my favorite Dawkins quotes, in fact, and he might not have been the first one to say this, but, he said, everybody on earth is an atheist for 99% of all the other religions in the world. We just take it the extra 1%, right? It's like, just like I know there's no such thing as Zeus,
Right.
the common understanding of God, like I know,
Well,
kind of like a believer doesn't exist.
And I kind of anticipated this as I was thinking about the interaction with the bishop and his counselors, and I was trying to think, okay, what am I going to say? How am I going to present? As I was running those scenarios in my mind, I thought, okay, if it gets to this point, maybe, if it gets confrontational at all, which it never did, but if it gets confrontational and they start saying, well, what about this and this and this, then I could say, well, let's turn to D&C section 132. And here's Jesus that's speaking through Joseph Smith. And let's read the verses about the virgins. And if you get these virgins, you can't commit adultery with them because they belong to you. And you can't commit adultery with something that belongs to you. Do you believe that this is Jesus talking? And like really put their feet to the fire,
right?
Because
does this sound like an eternal being who all dimensions are open to him and understands and comprehends all, or does this sound like a guy trying to make an excuse to have some fun?
Yeah,
right.
And so, like, to me, I could prove to them through that encounter that they are atheists when it comes to D&C 132.
Right. Exactly.
But they would not admit that. Like that. There's so much writing on their belief, even, it would cause them this cognitive dissonance, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They wouldn't be able to say, yes, I believe that that's Jesus, or if they do, they haven't really thought about what that means. And because there's no way that they believe that was, because they don't live their life that way, and so you're an atheist when it comes to D&C 132. But even if I did that, what impact would it have? It wouldn't. They wouldn't walk away from my house going, "Wow, Glenn had a really good point. I don't believe in God anymore.
I'm going to stop home teaching." Yeah,
I don't believe in Joseph Smith anymore. Holy cow! Wow, This was right in front of my nose all along. Thanks, Glenn. It doesn't work like that, and that's why. And I'm now anticipating one of the things that I think you're going to push back against. But this is why I think that you can't really reclaim atheists. Like I also don't think that they're going to walk away going, "Wow, that's a really cool atheist. That's gonna change the way that I feel about atheists. He wasn't a total asshole in the way that he was doing." I don't think that. I think there's so much writing on the way that they've already framed everything in the world, that things, like this little pebble that's going to knock against the speeding windshield of their faith and their worldview, it might cause a little ding, but they're just going to fix it.
Right.
So I don't really think that it's going to have much of an impact.
Well, and I think you're right for those guys, but and I know you are anticipating this, where I'm going to push back is I can guarantee that we can take back the label of atheism, but you personally can't do it. I personally can't do it. But when I see, for me, the examples I have, there's really two, and I apologize because I realize that this is not in any way trying to compare myself or my plight or anything to these groups, but I think about the word queer for the LGBT community and how it was nothing but a pejorative term for so long, and has come to, at least within the community, be something that's embraced and respected, and it's become a real sort of like positive thing, turning that around. Now there are clearly people out there that still use it, that it hasn't changed for them, the pejorative way that they use it. But then I also think of like the N-word, which I'm not going to say, but again, the in-group has owned it, and that's a battle I think that's exhilarating to me to see that that's one, that people were able to take this thing that was meant to be the ultimate in pejorative terms, and people were able to turn it around, and it took time. It still exists definitely as a pejorative term, and so you're never able to totally solve it. But I think on a global scale, I think there's a shift happening, so that the concept of being an atheist, even though the word, it feels like, what do they call it, ash in your mouth, or it feels like whatever, there's like a term for it, I can't think of it, but it hurts to say. And for a while, it was like, I had a hard time even expressing the word. Like you said, saying it out loud for the first time is kind of scary and exhilarating, but it's like the first time I ever got myself to say the F word the first time. It was like, I can't quite do it, and then it kind of rolls out awkwardly. But globally, the concept of atheism, I think, is becoming more and more accepted, so that helps, right? So there's already some groundwork being done. And I think just like say the word queer or something like that, that every time we own it and we say it, and we say it with confidence, and we say it without having to backpedal a bit and say, like, I'm atheist, but it doesn't mean I don't believe that there's no possibility of something happening, which I hear just a ton. It's like every time you do that, I just feel like, oh, we're losing more of the fight that we don't necessarily have to, because every time we say it, we're apologizing for it. I'm unapologetically an atheist because I got to this point through pain. I got to this point through incredible amounts of hard work and personal turmoil, and it's like, this is where I came out, and if that's my consolation prize, I guess I have to kind of own it. But that's sort of my second thing, is why I think we can take it back, is that I think you did win a little battle there, not in their hearts, and they don't matter. Those guys that came to your house, like, their opinion of atheism doesn't really matter. But to be able to say it, personally for me, every time now that I can confidently say that's who I am, it, for me, is winning a battle against my prior self, the self that would have hated myself if it knew that as a youth. And I think that's a battle worth winning. So that's my pushing back, is that individually, no, I don't think that we can change the hearts and minds of other individuals, but collectively, I think we can take the word back, personally.
Yeah, well, okay. So there's a lot of things I could respond to in that. I think I'm thinking about that Orange County example again, right? Where you've got the person from California, you've got the person from Indiana, and they might get to the point where they're like, I'm just going to say I'm from Orange County, and I'm not going to say, oh, I'm from the one in California, because everybody should know that California is the Orange County, or vice versa for Indiana. So when they're talking and they're identifying themselves as being from Orange County, they don't give any more information, and they just assume you should know what this means. So that to me is the equivalent of saying, I'm just going to call myself an atheist, but I'm not going to try to correct any misconceptions out there. That means that, or it doesn't mean that I'm absolutely positive that there's no God. Like the equivocation that you find distasteful is actually valuable, and it could be valuable in making an ultimate change and reclaiming atheist. No,
that's a good point.
My hesitation about the things changing quickly, and the reason I gave the Tower of Babel example is because it doesn't happen overnight. So you mentioned time, and so if you look at the word queer, if you look at the N word, even going back to Yankee.
Sure, yeah.
Yankee was a pejorative term that the British gave to the colonists because they were jerking off. They were yanking. It was a pejorative term. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Like they're wankers.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like you guys are Yankees. You're just out there.
I mean, it makes perfect
sense
now that I think about it.
but this is another example. So it goes back to the in and out group things that I talked about earlier. This is an out group. This is the outsiders, the British, or that they're insiders to themselves, but they're defining their British superiority based on the base vulgarness of these colonists that, look, they think that they want to do their own government, but they're not as educated as we are. And so they've got this pejorative term, and then the colonists take it and go, okay, yeah, well, guess what? You're going to get your asses whipped by a bunch of Yankees. How does that feel? And so they
Right.
they
Yeah.
they reclaimed it and they reappropriated
Right.
it. And now we're hundreds of years away from it, and it isn't even really a term anymore. It's a mascot for a baseball team, and it's it's in our national
Yeah. It's
hymns or
fun. Yeah.
songs and stuff. But it's not really a term.
Yeah. Yankee Doodle Dandy. It's like it's a fun. I mean, now
Yeah,
Yankee Doodle Dandy. That actually makes total sense.
yeah,
Now that I think about the original term.
like a dandy, right? Yeah,
Yankee
I'm a
Doodle.
Yankee
I know
Doodle
what that
dandy.
means.
Yeah,
Well,
and
now
a
I can't.
dandy
Now
to
I can't
somebody who
listen to that
dresses.
song.
Yeah, a dandy's like a metrosexual. That's what it meant back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so with the word queer, I think we're still in the early stages of this, and the first stage, you might say that the LGBTQ group have to be comfortable with using that word themselves, and they have to empower that with
Right.
themselves, and
Right.
it's that in-group thing where it becomes a source of pride to them because it encapsulates all of the persecution and things from outsiders, and that maybe that's the first stage in evolution of it, but then it's got to cross over, and I think what happens is the acceptance of the wrong that it has when you're applying that term pejoratively. That acceptance has to spread, and so
Right.
as that acceptance spread, more people get in the in group, whether they're actually queer or not, but they become allies because they agree with it, and it's that group expands. And because that term has been reappropriated by people inside the group, as the group expands, more people are inside the group, and I think that's the process where that language, that word would change, right? And it's used a little bit differently, that the N word is, but I think that's still, it becomes a very clear. If you're in the in group, you can use it. If you're not in the in group or in the N group, then you can't use it. Anyway,
Right.
so with atheist, is there a way? I think calling it reclaiming it is a misnomer by itself because it never did mean anything positive, in the general scheme of things. So it's not a restoration, but it's trying to reappropriate it and have some pride in it. And really what you're saying is we want the in group to grow. We
Right.
want so the first stage of it is for people who actually feel this way to become comfortable calling themselves that, and reclaim the word and do it with pride, and take the assholeness out of it.
Right. Well,
um
I think for me, it's
you
kind
know
of like the John. We were talking about John Hamer, and I remember several times, he's been asked, like, why gravitate to the community of Christ, when his belief structure is certainly something that he has helped hone and craft kind of on his own. And I think, uh, his response was really telling. It was something along the lines of, "Look, this already exists. This structure is there, and starting from scratch will often get you nowhere." And so, and correct me if I'm wrong here, this is just the way I interpreted what he said. It was like, this thing exists, and not in a bad way. I can take advantage of that structure, and that will allow me to have a vehicle and a voice to sort of change perception and kind of have, my way of thinking broadcast out. And so, and am I wrong about that? Does that sound about right?
I think so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
So I just
I
want to
think
make
that
sure
sounds
I'm
right. Not that I think that you're wrong.
okay. Good. I just for me, that's how I've thought now about atheism, because like you, Glenn, it took me a long time to actually say the word. I kept thinking of, like, well, what's the term I actually want to use? Like, I don't really like humanist any more than that, and I almost kind of want to, like, create something new, but I'm gonna have to explain what that means every time. And I just kind of had this moment where it was like, for better or worse, this word does exist, and it technically does describe, what it is that I am in terms of my belief. And so I thought, well, it's kind of this burned out crack house of a building, but at least it's a building. And maybe I can start to
Yeah.
redecorate. Maybe I can start to put it back together. And just like you're saying, maybe only the in group will ever see it as a safe space. But the word does have power, and it does have meaning, and it cuts through a whole bunch. of, I don't want to say unnecessary, but the need to sort of ramp up into describing sort of what you are for people that honestly probably don't care either way. I mean, at the end of the day, if you sit there and go like, well, I'm kind of this secular humanist, optimist, I believe in the goodness of things and not quite paranormal or supernatural, and people go, so what you're saying is atheist, right? And you're like, yeah, but I'm not like I just don't like that word. And for me, if that's I guess for me, like, and the John Glen episode was a perfect example, because love him, but it's like, if the only reason that you don't want to use the label is just because personally you just don't like how it sounds or how it tastes in your mouth, like it's just a really hard position to be in. But we can get past that. I mean, I'm sort of now to that point, and I know others in this very podcast kind of get to that point where it's like, hey, I wish there was a different word. I wish there was something that wasn't so loaded, but it is what it is. Words, like you're saying, do have their meanings, and I don't know, maybe it is easier to use a word that already has a meaning and try to turn that ship around than try to build a new ship from scratch. I don't know.
Well, and I think, if you look at the in group and the out group, and you say the first stage of reclaiming atheist or normalizing atheist or taking the sting out of atheist is that the people that are atheist all agree, and
Right.
and that word becomes a powerful word. And I think the secular humanists and all these other things that are gymnasticking around the word atheist is an indication that still hasn't completely happened
Right.
with the in group. And then at some point it's got to cross over. So how do you bring people into the in group and make it so that a Mormon bishopric or Christians or people who already have this pejorative view of atheists change that, because that's a bigger thing, crossing over into that group where they're not really in the in group but they become allies for it.
Yeah.
Like, is it possible to be an atheist ally even if you believe very strongly in God? I don't know, but I think in John DeLynne's case, because his primary audience, I think, with Mormon stories and people who are donating, that's how he makes his living, right? Donations to the podcast and what he's
Totally,
doing
yeah.
with so he can't just focus on the in group of atheists,
That's
because
right.
that's not his group. And so he's aware of the negative stereotypes that are built into atheists, and so shies away from that word because of it would do more damage, I think. And you saw that with the Scott Gordon,
Yeah.
picking up on it, and then Dan Peterson wrote a blog about it. Infants on thrones. I don't know who they are or what they are, but they called John DeLynne I don't know, or what was it? Reluctant atheist.
The reluctant
So he must
atheist.
be.
Yeah.
So he must be. But
I just think about, it's one of
he
those,
gets his attacked on.
and sort of two things I was thinking of is saying I totally agree. I think to myself, so when I was in high school, I did cheerleading.
Oh my God, Trevor!
Where?
Oh my God, Trevor!
Trevor!
Go,
Oh my God,
Trevor!
Trevor, go,
Oh my
Trevor!
God, Trevor!
Go, Trevor!
Go, Trevor!
Go, Trevor!
Oh my God!
One,
2, 3, 4, 5. Mighty Spartans don't take no jive. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's back it up and do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mighty Spartans don't take no jive. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's back it up and do it again. Are you a Spartan?
I think so.
Are you a Spartan?
I think so.
Oh. Hey, who's that Spartan hanging upside down?
Me. It's me.
I said, who's that Spartan hanging upside down?
Me. It's me.
Uh-huh. 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 Uh-huh.
Right. So I was a male cheerleader, and me and my friend were the very first ever in our high school, and it was a pretty small high school. It was like 700 kids. And I learned a really important lesson sort of my first year doing that, where I tried my best, and this is similar with Mormonism and almost every other label I've had. Maybe this is where I learned it from. At first, you'd try to hide it, and you'd almost act like I'd be out on the field, like I I would never like, we were supposed to wear your uniforms during game days, and I just wouldn't do it, and go out to the field and you'd kind of be doing it and trying to like act like you're kind of above these things. And you'd get made fun of so much worse because people saw your insecurity and weakness around it. And so they'd lay into you. Like people want to sort of take you apart. But I found a huge change that when I moved in my second year of doing it. If I'm going to do this, I'm just going to embrace it. And so I I was sort of out and proud, being a cheerleader. I was wearing my stuff. During the games, I would do the full things with the girls, like get just as involved, do the dances. And, there were still people that would make fun, that would have made fun no matter what. But owning it and leaning into it caused a huge tonal shift, and then I was able to find the allies. I was able to find people that were like, you know what, I'm cool with this, and other people started getting more familiar with it and cooler with it. And so John Glen is in a very, very complicated situation. So John, if you're listening, I totally get it. But that is sort of one thing that is not so much that the waffling on it is distasteful to me at all. It's just that, look, the people that are going to hate you for just not believing like they are, they're not going to care what your label is. Showing that further sign of being uncomfortable with it, they'll take just as much advantage of it. So I just feel like as a maturity thing. Oh, sorry, go.
No, in our label game, why didn't you give me male cheerleader as a descriptor?
What would you have said?
I don't know. I wouldn't have said John Glen, but
that's yeah.
But it's an interesting parallel. No, I think that's a really interesting example to bring into this, because you had that. You wanted, no one was twisting your arm to be a cheerleader. You wanted to do it, but you also were aware of the ridicule out there and very sensitive to it. And so there was that sense of shame, and it took you, whatever it took for you to just embrace that and not feel shame from it, even though you know that it's still there and it still probably bugged you.
Yeah, and I kind of had to fake it until I made it. So I was feeling embarrassed inside of myself when I'd say, yeah, I'm a male. I would admit it. I'd be like, people are like, what do you do? Do you play any sports? And I would, inside my heart, go like, oh, here it goes. And I'd say, I'm a male cheerleader. Same way now I kind of go, I'm an atheist, even though in my heart I'm like, okay, I'm doing this, but it does. It actually does start to make a little bit of a positive change. And the last thing I just wanted to say, you're kind of talking about how do we move this possibly to the out group, and the parallel for me. I don't know if this is the solution, but I think of Mormonism, and for me, the label of being Mormon, I never wanted to encapsulate in my beliefs. I didn't like when people were like, you're Mormon, so that's your belief structure. For me, I wanted the label of Mormon to mean my lifestyle. I want it to mean the person I was, the good things I would do, the service I would render. And I think when I heard you say that, and maybe this isn't what you meant, but atheists, we kind of need to agree on what it means. I don't know if we necessarily need to agree on everyone. Some people are going to truly say like, no, atheism does mean you do not believe 100% that there's any even chance of a God. That's, call it agnostic if you want anything else. But for me, I think that the more positive spin is, can atheism mean a lifestyle? Can atheism mean I'm still a good person, that I do good things, I eat, drink, and I am merry, but in a way that's positive for my children. I am active, I'm healthy. If that's the agreeance that we can get as sort of atheists or unbelievers, like I would be totally stoked if we can all just say atheism can mean all kinds of things, but at least if we can have it mean you're a good person, it actually is an influence to do good things in the moment, because when those moments are gone, they're gone. I don't know if we'll ever get there, but I would hope that's at least a part of it, that it can stop meaning the thing I don't believe in and more the thing I do, which is being totally present and as good as I can in the short moments I've got.
Well, I've got two things for you.
Oh,
and one is the geo translation to that scripture is now eat, drink, be merry, and cheer. For tomorrow you shall die.
Miss Craig, I did drugs once. I am a Spartan. So check me out. So check us out.
So you can be a cheerleader and just
Hooray.
do what you're gonna do, right? And then the other thing, I just your example of Mormon and not wanting, you don't want to be defined. Like it crosses into that I don't want other people to be a certain way kind of thing. You can't change those other people, right? So if
Right.
and I had this experience when I was teaching folklore to students at Indiana University, and then they would find out that I was Mormon, and they would start telling me, "Oh, so you don't drink Mountain Dew?" And I'm
Right.
like, "No, I can drink Mountain Dew." "No, you don't. You can't.
You're
Mormons
like,
can't drink."
I think I
And
would
I'm like,
know.
yeah, I kind of know a little bit better than you do. No, but I remember that there's no Mountain Dew in the vending machines at Brigham Young University because I went there for one camp once, and yeah, so you can't drink. And I'm like, okay, you've got this misconception. I can try and correct it, but it's not going to work. That person to this day still probably believes that Mormons don't drink caffeine or they don't drink
Right.
Mountain Dew or whatever. And so what? You know, like I may not want or have wanted at the time people to have incorrect assumptions about the Orange County that I'm talking about. You know, I'm talking about the one in California, not the one in Indiana, and they can't get it past their head that it's the one in Indiana. I can't really change, and that's when I'm talking about like reclaiming atheists. That I just have to focus on. For me, is that right? How do I
Right.
want to present myself? I need to understand the audience that I'm talking to, and
Right.
if the audience doesn't, so I just because I said to the bishop in my house this last week that I made it, that doesn't mean that I'm going to go out and do this in every situation.
Right. Oh
I
yeah,
that
me
was a
me either. Yeah, yeah.
calculated, strategy. So I and I would think, for this episode in this series, how to be an atheist, or the new atheist guide to not being a total asshole is to understand that it's okay for people to misunderstand the label
Yeah.
atheist.
Yeah.
In fact,
Totally.
it's just natural, and and you used to probably too. So you should have more empathy for the people who are in that position that don't, and so be, give the benefit of the doubt to them, not be so how stupid are they that they think that atheist means all of these stupid things, which it doesn't. It's like, well, there's a reason, there's really good reasons why they believe that, and it's doing some valuable stuff for what they want out of life.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
trying to combat that, then just being an asshole for asshole's sake, it doesn't do you or them any good to do it.
Oh,
So
I totally
that
agree. I
that
totally
would be
agree with
my
that.
not being a total asshole part of adopting atheism as a label for yourself.
I totally agree, Glenn. I think that's an excellent point to end on. So as a final thing, we're going to kind of wrap up here. So certainly, if there is any possibility of changing the perception or the label of atheism, one of the best ways to do it is just with sort of familiarity and taking the sting out of a word. The best way to do that is to just say it over and over and over again. And the best way to say something over and over and over again is to put it in the form of music. And Glenn, you happen to be a very talented creator of sort of parody songs. As far as I understand, the episode of
Oh no, I am. I am.
that's exactly the
Yes,
Disney
I
songs for
definitely am.
alienated Mormon youth. That's honestly, in my mind, one
And
of the
some of those.
finest hours of podcasting that's ever been created. So, so we're gonna come up with right here and now the Atheist song. Okay,
On the spot,
On
without any.
without any practice or anything. So it's probably gonna be a huge train wreck. But what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start a little backing track.
Okay, go ahead and
It's
and
just
do it.
it's
and I'll
just me
see
singing.
if
So here
anything
we go.
comes.
I'm gonna kind of lay down the beat
Okay.
and see if you can sort of pick it up. And here we go. So this is the Atheist song. I'll begin. Atheism, 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 atheism,
Atheism is okay.
atheism, atheism, atheism,
Atheism is
atheism
okay.
is okay.
Yeah,
Atheism
I
is
feel
okay.
it.
See, that was good. That actually makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think we're doing atheism any favors right now, Sage.
We just took it back.
I just
we
don't
just
think
took it
we're
back
helping.
like 400
Yeah.
years. So, Glenn, actually, this was This was super fun, man. Thank you so much for joining me, talking about labels. And congratulations on first time admitting in public to a church authority that you're an atheist. That's huge.
Yeah.
Woohoo. Cool.
Thanks, Sage.
Well, Glenn, thanks very much, and we will talk to you later. And so ends the 5th episode of the new Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. So what did we learn today? Today, we learned that labels are a powerful part of our everyday lives. We can use them to connect with our in-group or easily stereotype or dismiss those not like us. We also learned that it just so happens that atheist is one of the most loaded terms of the modern era. And while it might be frustrating to find that the word that best describes your perception of the world is almost universally a negative, the more that we embrace and embolden ourselves to use it without shame, we may just find that perception shift. I, for one, know that every new atheist who finds the courage to call it like it is and control their own narrative of what it means to be an atheist gives myself and others like me a sense of hope and camaraderie that transcends any simple label. Whatever label you prefer, I hope you'll join me next time on the new Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. And until then, this is Sage saying, be aggressive, be aggressive, go Cubs!
God is a concept by which we measure our pain. I'll say it again. God is a concept by which we measure our pain. Yeah. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in arching. I don't believe in a Bible. I don't believe in a tarot. I don't believe in a Hitler. I don't believe in a Jesus. I don't believe in a Kennedy. I don't believe in a Buddha. I don't believe in a mantra. I don't believe in a guitar. I don't believe in a yoga. I don't believe in a kings. I don't believe in a Elvis. I don't believe in a Zimmerman. I don't believe in a Beatles. I just believe in me. And that's reality.
Sounds good.
But
All right, man.
So far so good. We got some good stuff coming up, and this one was fun. I like it a lot. And it was actually
Yeah.
it was actually the John DeLynn episode where I was like, oh man, I get the John DeLynn hate. That's his job, but even he is sort of waffling on it. It's like it leaves a whole bunch of us going like, oh, John, you could do so much good if you would just help sort of own this thing. And I get that that's not our place to put that on him. But it just hurts a little bit because I don't have a lot of people out there that
But like, what? I mean, when you said you could do so much good, like what would the good be with John Dehlin owning the term atheism? Where is that good? Like, what is the good? Where is it happening?
that's a really good question. It's definitely a self-serving sort of good. I think it's a confirmation that look, I recognize John Dehlin as an incredibly good-hearted person and somebody who stands for a lot of things. He's sort of I think it feels like his new embrace of truly being ex-Mormon, because he used to like not even want to really talk about, for me, the transition for him going from, it's even like Heather, like going from I'm a believer and I'm going to play fair to like, no, I'm going to own that I don't believe this stuff and I see it as being harmful, and the things that he'll say, it was like, okay, good. I love hearing this person who I do, or at one point idolized, and saw as a leader of the cause, embracing it. And that makes you like, it's like the confident leader. You're like, oh, he confidently owns this situation he's in now. And then but for that belief system where it's like, and I realize it's totally unfair. It's like all those people with Heather going like, just say it, just say you don't believe, and she legitimately is like, that's not who I am inside right now, so it wouldn't be fair to say that thing. And she was right at that point. But I don't know. I'm just saying that was my reaction. It's like I understand actually why that wouldn't be fair for him to expect him to do that. But I guess that's maybe what hope to do a little bit with this.
Yeah.
It's like there are people out there that can embrace it and don't have to worry so much about the baggage, because there will always be baggage, and there's not much you can do to change that.
Yeah. So maybe part of not being a total asshole as an atheist is getting over your own insecurity about being an atheist. So like, why would you need someone high profile like John Dehlin to come out on your side? It's that self-serving piece that you talked about to help bolster up where you're feeling maybe a little insecure about this, and that adds a greater sense of comfort and security, because okay, we just got another one on our side, and that makes it all, so maybe if advice for the atheists out there, and I don't know if you're still recording. I'm still recording.
I always still record. I learned that from you.
Yeah. All right. But like that introspective look, like how comfortable are you being an atheist, claiming that you're an atheist? What do you have to do just yourself to be comfortable with it, and not worrying about what other people think or what other people feel, or if they're validating you or not, because that you've done the right thing, or that you feel the right thing.
Yeah.
And you're being true to yourself. And I would imagine that in that queer example, and maybe with the N-word or the Yankees or anything like that, that there must have been some kind of transition where they said, I'm not going to be embarrassed by the word queer anymore.
Right.
I'm going to own this. And I'm going to confidently own it. But that was just a personal thing, that it was very sincere and genuine, and not a show to try and get other people on board, or I don't know.
It's kind of blowing my mind, because I think it just snapped for me why I think I wanted that validation. Like growing up as Mormon, like leader validation, that's like what your whole life is based around, is needing someone else to validate you and tell you what to do, and tell you what to believe,
and tell you that you're right.
Tell you that you're right. And
like,
I think you're exactly right. It's like I don't need John Dehlin to do it. I don't need anybody else to do it. I'm doing it.
And that was a huge part of my faith transition, because I would kneel down and pray, hey, can you give me a sign that I'm on the right track? Am I doing the right things? I want to feel that.
Yeah.
I want to, and getting that, whether it's in prayer from God, or if it's from my leaders or from my parents, that like I got to a point, And I think it kind of ties into respect too, because I started losing respect for some of the authority figures in the church, and that eroded the sense of authority that I felt, where I'm like, okay, no, you're not going to be, what do they call themselves? Like a steward?
Right.
You're not going to be my steward.
Right.
You don't have stewardship over
Right.
me. I am not going to give that to you anymore. Like I recognize I've grown up in a system where we just acquiesce our power and we give it to you. And I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to take responsibility. And, I was still believing in God at the time and thinking, if it turns out that this is the wrong decision, and I get busted for it later on, don't worry, it's on me. It's
Right.
not on you,
Yeah.
Bishop. I'll take responsibility for this and my actions. And, so having that sense of confidence where, I don't know. You can be confident being an atheist, and you don't have to rely on other people to validate you, even though I don't know that you can ever really get away from that because we're human.
No, it's true.
And that's such an important part.
I think that's huge, Glenn. I just had it feels like a breakthrough moment. It's like I don't need Dawkins. I don't need the infants. I don't need somebody to be my leader into the world of atheism. Like, it's an inherently the most personal thing you can ever experience. So why not just own it yourself? That's huge.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's the end of the John Lennon song "God," right? God is a concept by which we measure our pain, and then he does, I don't believe in history, I don't believe in Elvis, I don't believe in Beatles, I just believe in me.
Yeah.
Yoko and me, because he's got to throw her in there for that time. That's reality. But that's I've never really thought about that before. That's his atheist song about God, and it ends with, maybe that's where I'm getting it from, and it's just subliminally planted in there from all of the times that I was listening to non-gospel approved horrible John Lennon messages that just ruined me.
Well, I think as long as you're not Charles Manson, I think basing most of your belief structures off of Beatles music is a pretty safe way to go. So
that was more of a Paul McCartney thing. I don't think you can blame John for Helter Skelter.
No, that's very true. Yeah, John Lennon. That's the way.
Yeah.
So you don't need Dawkins. You just need John Lennon.
Right.
Well, Glenn, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for giving me some of your Saturday. This was great. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.